Alright, so on this video I wanted to go over something that most of you guys who are carrying SIGs should be aware of. As you know, there's a big dilemma with the whole Sig P320 lineup, and it has many issues. A lot of people's covered most of that stuff, and of course, you know, Sig constantly denying that there's a problem, and there's obviously a problem. I'll tell you what the problem is from the get-go, and it's not just a Sig problem. It's only a Sig problem right now, but it will be a problem in other manufacturers soon, is because, in my opinion, it's modern manufacturing lack of knowledge of how guns are supposed to be built, or something. You know, it's engineers doing engineering things and not understanding how guns work and how they're supposed to be. Now, engineers are supposed to learn geometry and why physics would do this or that, but it seems with this gun, very poorly designed. Cool gun. I like the gun personally. I have two of them. I have this one and a M17X, but I would never carry them. So I'm not going to get into all of the issues that, you know, we already know about and people's already talking about. The issue no one's talking about that I want to talk about is the safety or lack thereof. So in my opinion, this safety was added, or from what I understand too, the safety was added because the military wanted a manual safety. But this is not a manual safety. It's only a manual safety in the sense that it looks like one, it clicks like one, it acts like one, but it's not. So what is a safety's job? A manual safety, as opposed to the passive safeties that are built into the designs, that such as disconnectors, firing pin block safeties, that kind of thing. So a safety, period, don't care what anyone else tells you, absolutely has to block the sear, the movement of the sear. It never needs to block the trigger. It only has to block the sear. That's the way it's always been, because that's what makes things drop safe. That's one of the reasons this thing was not drop safe when it first came out. If need to, we'll get into that in a future video about the geometry of all these parts being completely backwards from what they should be, and why they potentially are still drop unsafe. But back to the safety. So every safety should always block the sear. Now, I know some of you guys are gonna be like, well, what about my that's got this, then it blocks the trigger, and, you know, AK, AR, or whatever. Okay. Again, it has to block the movement of the sear, period. I don't care how you design it. If you go look in all the older guns that's been around forever, that's been deemed to be safe, and all this, that's good manual safeties, whether you're talking about ARs, AKs, M1s, whatever, 1911s, they're all going to block the sear. Now, they can block the trigger if the trigger is the sear. But if you have an independent part, one's a trigger, one's a sear, safety has to block the sear. So this thing, when you flip it on, it only blocks the trigger. All right, that does nothing for drop safe. That does nothing for inertia acting on the parts, which is what the safety was originally designed to do, right? It's designed so if it, you know, such of a 1911, if you were to drop it, and it, you know, it hit the hammer, or it hit like this, and then the inertia made the trigger move, it couldn't trip the sear to make the gun fire. So, and again, if I need to make a video in the future showing some of these different designs, I can. But if you just look at, I mean, if you have general knowledge of your own guns, and you look at your gun and take it apart and flip the safeties on a Browning, high power, Colt 1911, whatever gun it is, you know, a tried and true gun with a manual safety, you're going to see that it blocks the sear. I don't know why this thing only blocks the trigger. That's not a safety. I mean, it's a feel-good measure that they threw in here as a second thought to appease the military and make them think that they have a safe gun. And the only it's no more safe than one without a safety, a manual safety, with the exception of maybe if you have some dummy who can't keep his finger off the trigger, accidentally pulling the trigger, yeah, it would stop that. But that's about the only thing this so-called safety is going to do. So like I said, if I yank this thing apart real quick, probably need to go get something to show you. But so, and again, we can take the fire group part. You've seen all this on other videos because people are just tearing this gun a new butthole. But if we were to pull this out, you would see this is only blocking the movement of the trigger. So, but it's doing nothing. Hold on just a second. Let me grab a screwdriver. But it's doing nothing to block the movement of the sear, which is what makes guns unsafe. Is inertia. Mass and inertia is a safety problem in all the guns. That's what you're trying to defeat. It is you know, and it ain't necessarily just always a safety thing. Like a 1911, back in the day, you know, you had the heavy steel triggers, and if you got a light trigger or a negative system, you drop the slide and then the hammer would trip and follow the slide home, and it's because the inertia would jump the gun forward, and the trigger has mass, so it wants to stay there, and it ends up tripping the sear and dropping it to half cock. But as you can see, with this off safe, trigger can move. With it on safe, trigger can't move because it's blocking just the trigger. So with it off safe, you can see here, I can move the sear down. With it on safe, I can move the sear down. So just be aware of that. That's what the video is for. It's just to tell you that this safety is not a safety, not in a true sense of what a safety is. So I just wanted to make the video so that all you guys who are, especially appendix carrying these things, again, I'm not here to tell people what to do, but I wouldn't carry one of these 3 o'clock appendix or anything. But if you're carrying one like an M18, M17, because it has the safety and it makes you feel like it's not going to go off, I would rethink that, because this is not going to solve the problem that these guns have going off. It's only going to solve the problem of anything getting in there pulling the trigger, which is, again, not the problem, because why is this gun going off in all of these different holsters that's been out forever, but nobody else's guns are going off in the same holsters? It's not a holster problem. Can the holster be a part of the problem? Sure, but it's a poor designed gun. That's just as simple as that. It's a cool guy, you know, hey, we can swap out grip modules. Every time, the more we advance in technology, in guns and how we do things, we also lose principles that guns are made by from the beginning of time that we've been using guns. Like they've always had these, you know, the rules of thumb. Like obviously it's like everyday life. You know, you don't jump off of a building because you're not going to survive that. You don't touch something hot. Once you learn that, hey, that's hot, you don't touch it. This stuff you learn as kids. And these are some of the principles in physics that are involved with gun manufacturing that we're losing through these processes of casting, not even casting, mimming parts and you know, not having gunsmiths working for these manufacturers. Having an armorer at a manufacturer doesn't mean nothing, because an armorer is just someone who can take a gun apart, that particular gun apart, and put it back together and change parts pretty good, pretty efficiently. That don't necessarily make you a gunsmith. The knowledge of how guns work is what makes you a gunsmith. And knowing that systems have to be positive, neutral at worst, but never negative, which is some of the problems you're running into with these striker blocks or firing pin block safety, striker safeties, whatever you want to call them. It's geometry is one of the biggest adversaries of this gun. It's the engineers not understanding that the geometry is way off from what it should be. And I'm going to touch on this real quick and then I'm going to end the video. So if you have a pivot point right here, right, but your sear is way back here, you have a leverage for inertia to act on to trip this sear. Even though it's loaded, spring loaded against the striker, dropping, all this stuff, this is what happens, is the physics of the angles being negative, or the way the spring's pushing on it, or how long of a distance that there is between the point that something pivots and the engagement of what it's engaging, right? The longer this is, the more susceptible it is to dropping or inertia problems or anything like that, because it creates more leverage. So if this was half this distance, it would take twice as much force to disengage it than it would be the way it is now. The longer it gets, the less force it takes to disengage it. And these are things that people got to understand, and that engineers need to take into consideration when they're designing stuff like this. You can't just, just because you're a smart guy engineer, don't mean that you can disregard the methods and the what's the word I'm looking for? The traditional ways that guns were made. You can change them, the way they work and the way they look, and redesign them in a way that they're positioned different, but the end result has to be still the same. It has to be a positive system. It has to be geometry-wise in sync with the way that we know science to say that forces and inertia and stuff like that would act on the gun if you were to drop it, or and again, the way this, I'm getting off on a tangent again. So the way this thing is fully cocked when it's closed, that's one of the things that makes the Glock so safe, is because it's a semi-double action. This is mostly it's a single action striker fire. That's what it is. There's no cocking of the striker to fire it. It's cocked, you pull the trigger, it moves, the striker goes. Like just about everything, bolt guns, whatever, they're all single action in a sense, that it only does one thing. It moves it out of the way and drops it. Where a double action by definition does two things or more, but two things being the key word to double. It cocks and releases the firing pin, hammer, whatever you're talking about as far as the system goes. But these systems have to be the way they've always been, and to my knowledge, there's no way to skate that. And when you do, this is the kind of thing you end up with. So all you guys carrying these with the safeties and thinking that they're safe, they're not. So just again, take the information for what it is and use it or don't use it. But hopefully you get something out of this, and thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next video.